I'll have about 4 questions on the final exam related to sampling methods. And in my opinion, these are some of the easiest questions on the final. So just learn this and you'll at least have 4 questions. Questions there, okay?
12%.
Yeah, 4 questions out of 50, that's about, 8% there. So there's no reason to miss these, okay? But every year, some students will miss some of these questions.
Is there reading required in chapter 12, or would you just take from the lecture?
You know, I would just look at the homework problems that I've assigned from chapter 12, and if you can answer those with no problem related to this, you're probably okay. I think I actually have to modify the assignment very briefly, but that's it. Okay, so these are the 4 methods that you need to know. And so let's talk about each one, okay? So simple random sampling, I'm just going to abbreviate as SRS. This means we have something called a sampling frame, which ideally is a list of everyone in the population. But whether or not it is a list of everyone in the population, we have a list to work off. Okay? A sampling frame is a list. And we randomly select individuals one by one from this list. The key distinguishing thing for simple random sampling is that you have a list of everyone in the population. So, if you work at a company, you can ask your HR department for a list of everyone who works at the company. Or if you go to a school, you might be able to get a list of all students. In those cases, it's easy to do simple random sampling. If you go to the city of Los Angeles and say, I want a list of everybody who lives in LA, that's much more difficult to do. Nobody has such a list for everyone who lives in LA. So, you just have to do. Okay, so that's simple random sampling. You got a list or a sampling frame. Ideally, it's a list of everyone. Maybe it's not a perfect list, but you want to pick individuals one by one from that list. I'm going to skip over to systematic sampling, which I think is the other easiest concept. And then we'll talk about stratified and cluster sampling right after this. Okay. So systematic sampling works best if there's a line or a queue. And basically you say, I'm going to select every 10th person, or every 8th person. doesn't matter. But instead of selecting everybody, we just select every 10th person or whatever we do. And that's how we get a systematic sample. Yes, questions?
What's the last word where it starts with a line or?
Q. Q-U-E-U-E. When you call tech support, they'll say, our agents are currently busy. Your call will be answered in the order that it was received. You have been placed in a queue. And they might do experiments. They might play different music and decide if certain music causes you to hang up faster. Who knows? Okay, let's talk about the other two, stratified sampling and cluster sampling. I'm going to erase. In stratified sampling, our population has subgroups. And we call these subgroups strata. And the idea behind the strata is that members in that subgroup have a common trait. With stratified sampling, we know the proportions of each group. And we select our sample to have the same proportions as each subgroup or each strata. So, for example, maybe you go to a school, and this school happens to be 60% female, 40% male. When you randomly select your sample, when you select a sample, you want to make sure that your sample is also 60% female and 40% male.
Can you write that example?
Sure. So example, population, is 60% female, 40% male. Okay? The groups female and male are the different strata in our population. Okay? You can create strata based on ethnicity, you can create strata based on age group, whatever you want. Okay? The idea being you know certain proportions in the population, and so you select your sample. So it is also 60% female and 40% male. Maybe 50 people, third-year female, 20-year male. So that's stratified sampling.
So we have to determine what type of sampling it is.
Yes, I'm going to read a description of thing, sampling, and you have to decide which form of sampling is being used. Okay?
So we're just 16 not 40 now, is that strata? That's strata, so you have to do
Yeah, those are your strata.
So you have to match them for strata.
You want to match the strata of your sample to the same proportions of the population. Okay? And the last one is cluster sampling. Cluster sampling, you also have subgroups. Population has subgroups called clusters. You generally use cluster sampling if it's very difficult to get a list of the population. So in simple random sampling, we have a list of the population. Cluster sampling maybe says it's hard to get that list. Difficult to get a list of the population. We'll say it's easier to get a list of clusters. We randomly select clusters. And then we sample within each cluster. So for cluster sampling, maybe we want to get a random sample of everyone who attends church. This would be a very difficult list to get. A list of every single person who attends church. Let's say we're just limiting ourselves to Los Angeles County. To get a list of everyone who attends church in Los Angeles County, that's a hard thing to do. But it's not very hard to get a list of all the churches in Los Angeles County. So there are clusters would be each church. So we get a list of all the churches, and then we randomly select maybe 20 different churches from that list. Once we have those churches selected, then we can perform sampling within each of the churches that have been selected. And that would be cluster sampling. Does that make sense? Here, I'll write that up on the board as well. So we want a sample of people who attend church. This is an example. Example of cluster sampling. We want a sample of people who attend church. We get a list of all churches. We randomly select of those churches. And then we perform sampling within these selected churches. So that's an example of cluster sampling. So let's try a few problems, okay? These are taken from your practice final exam.
Can we take a break and come back?
Yeah, after we do this though. So these are problems 50, 51, and 52 from the practice final exam. And I'll read these out loud. I want you guys to listen. Don't shout out your answer, but think. Problems 50, 51, and 52 from the practice final exam. I'm going to read these out. I want you to listen carefully, or if you have the practice final printed, you can follow along. Don't shout out your answer, but think of what kind of sampling method is being used. Okay, so problem 50 says, Major League Baseball wishes to conduct a survey of its players. Instead of trying to create a list of all the players from all the teams, Major League Baseball decides to randomly select 4 of their 30 baseball teams. They will survey all of the players on the 4 selected teams. What kind of sampling is this? Don't shout out your answer.
That's number 50.
This is number 50 on the practice final exam. Do I need to repeat that? Okay. Major League Baseball wishes to conduct a survey of its players. Instead of trying to create a list of all the players from all of their teams, they decide to randomly select 4 of their 30 baseball teams. They will survey all of the players on the 4 selected teams.
Cluster.
Don't shout out your answer, but I want you to think. Think of what kind of sampling method that is, but spoiler alert, it's cluster sampling. Okay.
Come on.
All right, do we have a question? Yes. Question?
So, when you do a cluster sampling, are you ever given like a set of methods like figures for the stratify sampling?
There's no proportions listed for cluster sampling. Cluster sampling, you have clusters and you randomly select your clusters.
Stratified is only one with proportions, or is it also
Correct.
systematic?
Stratified is the only one with proportions.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to read number 51. Again, don't shout out your answer. Listen carefully and try to determine what kind of sampling method this is. 51. A company wants to survey its employees. The company takes its master list of everyone in the company and randomly selects 100 of them for a survey. A company wants to survey its employees. The company takes its master list of everyone in the company and randomly selects 100 of them for the survey. Okay, what kind of sampling is this? Simple random sampling. Simple random sampling. Last one, probably the easiest of these examples. A toll bridge wants to survey the drivers who use the bridge. Please listen. Instead of trying to ask all of the drivers, the toll bridge decides to stop every 10th car that passes through the toll booth for the driver's opinions. So what kind of sampling is this? Systematic sampling. Very good. Okay, before I dismiss you for a break, let me pass out these instructor evaluations, okay? So, this is your opportunity to give me a grade. I sincerely hope that...
I don't think anyone has anything bad to say.
Okay, well, that's very nice for you to say, but I hope you enjoyed the course, and I will pass these out. If you like the course, I appreciate you bubbling in 9s, but of course you fill out as you feel appropriate. Your comments, your written comments are always appreciated as well. As for guest lecturers, just bubble in NA. We did not have any guest lecturers in this class, so pass these out. And I have to leave the classroom as you guys are filling these out, so I will put the leave the envelope on the front desk there. And when you finish filling these out, you can place them in the envelope. Pen or pencil?
The course is called Stats 10, right?
For date, you can just write fall quarter 2014. And I'll put up the
Introduction to Stats.
pen or pencil, that's fine.
What is the closest number?
Men vadå? Hemsidan? Men Smiles. Jo men just den heter Smile. Ja, det var det jag sa. Vadå? Vi hade Paradise Hotel.
Yeah, you can just write fall quarter 2014. That will suffice. You can, if you remember the actual dates, that's also fine.
You can take a break.
Yes, and after you complete filling that out, you can take a break.